J.D. Vance's so-called Jinx has gone viral, as a string of high-profile mishaps involving Viktor Orban, the Iran talks, and even the Pope are now being openly questioned. Big diplomatic and political fails in barely a month have fueled the narrative that Vance is carrying a curse, with every major mission he touches ending in embarrassment or defeat. The internet has ripped into Vance's supposed bad luck, portraying Trump's deputy as a walking hex who manages to doom each task he takes on. Commentators are now asking if he is the most unpopular US vice president in history, and Vance's collapsing approval ratings are doing most of the talking. US Vice President J.D. Vance's consecutive diplomatic mishaps have gone viral online, with clips, memes, and commentary turning his recent foreign policy outings into a running global joke. Hours after Vance failed to strike a deal with Iran in high-stakes talks, the American vice president seemingly suffered yet another setback, reinforcing the perception that nothing is going his way on the world stage. Before he arrived in Pakistan for the Iran talks, Vance had traveled to Budapest to publicly back Viktor Orban in Hungary's elections, inserting himself directly into a tense European political battle. Vance stood beside Orban and publicly endorsed him as the Hungarian leader chased a fifth consecutive term in power, presenting the Hungarian strongman as a key ally of the Trump White House. However, Orban went on to lose to the rival Tisza party, abruptly ending his 16-year rule in Hungary and making Vance's endorsement look like a spectacular miscalculation. Subsequently, Vance was also unable to strike any comprehensive deal with Iran, leaving Islamabad with no agreement and another failed mission added to his record. Despite an exhausting 21-hour-long marathon of talks, Iran and the USA both walked away from the negotiating table without a breakthrough, underscoring just how deep the divides still are. Vance blamed Iran's reluctance to abandon its nuclear program as the main reason the talks collapsed, arguing that Tehran refused to meet core American demands.
Well, good morning, everybody, and let me say a couple of notes of appreciation. First of all, to the Prime Minister of Pakistan and to Field Marshal Munir, who were both incredible hosts. And whatever shortcomings in the negotiation, it wasn't because of the Pakistanis, who did an amazing job and really tried to help us and the Iranians bridge the gap and get to a deal. We have been at it now for 21 hours, and we've had a number of substantive discussions with the Iranians. That's the good news. The bad news is that we have not reached an agreement, and I think that's bad news for Iran much more than it's bad news for the United States of America. So we go back to the United States having not come to an agreement. We've made very clear what our red lines are, what things we're willing to accommodate them on, and what things we're not willing to accommodate them on. And we've made that as clear as we possibly could, and they have chosen not to accept our terms. Questions?
Sir, Nick Robertson from CNN. Precisely what have they rejected here? Can you help us understand it a little bit?
Well, I won't go into all the details because I don't want to negotiate in public after we've negotiated for 21 hours in private. But the simple fact is that we need to see an affirmative commitment that they will not seek a nuclear weapon, and they will not seek the tools that would enable them to quickly achieve a nuclear weapon. That is the core goal of the President of the United States, and that's what we've tried to achieve through these negotiations. Again, their nuclear program, such as it is, the enrichment facilities that they had before, they've been destroyed. But the simple question is, do we see a fundamental commitment of will for the Iranians not to develop a nuclear weapon, not just now, not just 2 years from now, but for the long term? We haven't seen that yet. We hope that we will. Jen.
Was there a framework on anything? And also, did the Iranian frozen assets come up? And did you reach any conclusions on those frozen assets?
We talked about all those issues, Jen, and we talked about a number of issues beyond that. And so certainly those things came up. But again, we just could not get to a situation where the Iranians were willing to accept our terms. I think that we were quite flexible. We were quite accommodating. The president told us, you need to come here in good faith and make your best effort to get a deal. We did that, and unfortunately, we weren't able to make any headway. Preston.
Mr. Vice President, how often did you communicate with President Trump throughout the negotiations? There were reports that there were multiple rounds where there were breaks in between negotiations. How often did you communicate with the president throughout those rounds, and what was he saying as you were going through these negotiations that you said fell short?
Yeah, obviously we were talking to the president consistently. I don't know how many times we talked to him, a half dozen times, a dozen times over the past 21 hours. We obviously also talked to Admiral Cooper, to Pete, to Marco, to the entire national security team. We talked to Scott Bessent a number of times. So look, we were constantly in communication with the team because we were negotiating in good faith. And we leave here with a very simple proposal, a method of understanding that is our final and best offer. We'll see if the Iranians accept it. Thank you.
After these two major setbacks, social media users began resurfacing similar past instances, stitching together a pattern of defeats that feeds the narrative of a vice president cursed in diplomacy. Earlier, Vance had publicly backed Germany's AfD in national elections, but the far-right party eventually lost ground, adding another failed endorsement to his growing list. In another instance, Vance invited Pope Leo to attend America's 250th year celebration, hoping for a powerful symbolic moment linking faith and US power. But the American Pope rejected Vance's invitation and is instead expected to spend the 4th of July with migrants, a choice widely read as a quiet rebuke of the Trump administration's agenda. Back in 2025, J.D. Vance also paid a visit to an ailing Pope Francis at the Vatican, and just a day later the pontiff passed away, a tragic timing that critics now darkly fold into the Vance curse storyline. Beyond social media mockery, J.D. Vance's approval ratings have also plunged to a record low in 2026, signaling a serious erosion of public confidence. Polling data compiled by CNN indicates Vance is posting the weakest performance for a US vice president in recent times, putting him in historically bad territory. His net approval rating has fallen from a positive 3 points in early 2025 to negative 18 points now, a brutal swing that underlines how far his standing has collapsed. CNN's data analysis shows Vance's ratings dropped sharply, marking a 21-point decline that analysts describe as a dramatic slide in the wrong direction. By April 2026, reports say Vance was stuck at around 37% approval against 62% disapproval, a lopsided split that cements his reputation as deeply unpopular with American voters.